So I watched an interview with Callum Smith, and there were some interesting points and observations. So I want to give my perspective, and I want to preface that perspective with the following. As Smith is an advocate for autism, I have a high level of respect for Callum Smith. However, I will try to be as objective as possible. So let's go through these 8 statements/ideas. So the first idea is that Callum Smith's entire case rests on one sentence: styles make fights. And it's the oldest comfort blanket in boxing. But here's the thing: styles do make fights. Let me make my case. And we're going to have 3 people in this case, 3 great boxers: Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, and George Foreman. Now, when Muhammad Ali fought Joe Frazier the first time, Joe Frazier won on decision. And when Joe Frazier fought George Foreman won by second round knockout. But when George Foreman fought Muhammad Ali, he lost by an 8th round knockout. So Frazier beat Ali the first time, but then George Foreman beat Frazier, but then Ali beat George Foreman. And all this would indicate that styles do make fights. And you can go further. You can look at Ali versus Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston was a menace. He really was. He had Mike Tyson levels of intimidation, really underrated champion. But Ali just had the style to beat him. That elite footwork, he just could not get close. He couldn't get in range. But with all that being considered, how does Callum Smith beat Bivol? How does he do it? Does he try to break him down to the body and have a war with him? Or does he beat him with science, using the jab and being more conservative? I think Smith is a very multifaceted fighter. He can fight from range, he can fight from mid-range, or he can fight in the pocket. But sometimes when fighters have the ability to be multifaceted, they can do too many things. And I think against Bivol, he will need to have a very strict strategy, which is based around nullifying Bivol's strengths. So then the second idea is that Bivol beat both the men that beat Smith, which is Beterbiev and Canelo. So how does Callum Smith beat Bivol if Bivol has beaten both Beterbiev and Canelo? Now, as we've established, styles make fights, but the strategy will be essential here. Callum Smith used to have an elite left hook counter. It really was, and he will need to rediscover that to have success against Bivol. Now, when you look at Bivol versus Beterbiev in both fights, Beterbiev tried to break Bivol down. That's what he does. But Beterbiev was unsuccessful at breaking Bivol down. And the thing is with Bivol, the more you push him, the more he accelerates. Canelo tried to push him in the 3rd round and he accelerated to the next level. Beterbiev tried to push him in both fights, particularly the second fight, and then Bivol went to the next level. So it might be counterproductive to say this as a boxing fan, but Callum Smith to win, he might actually need to turn this into a chess match as opposed to a war of attrition. So he maybe would prefer to have a battle of the jabs as opposed to going into an all-out war. And of course, that premise could be mistaken. So the third idea is that Smith's confidence. Where is Smith's confidence right now? He states that when I'm at my best, I'm active. But he's not active. He's had 7 fights in 7 years with 18 months out, which prompts the question, is Callum Smith still the same boxer? Now, I think in his prime, Callum Smith was a high-level operator. But is that the Callum Smith of yesterday and not today? He looked absolutely elite when he fought George Groves. And I would urge you to look at that performance, because I think that performance gives any champion a hard time. But that was then, and this is now. And I think for Callum Smith to have any chance, he needs to rediscover that momentum, rediscover and become that great fighter again. Now, the next idea is that Bivol, he has this boxing genius, but it's not his power. It's his system. And I've always stated this, and I think I've called it when he goes to the matrix level. But when you break it down to what that means, Bivol has, in my opinion, elite acceleration. When you push Bivol, he just goes to another level. So he might start on level 4, but then he's got level 5, level 6, level 7, level 8, level 9. It just keeps going. And the Canelo fight showed that. The Beterbiev, the first fight of Beterbiev showed that. And then in Beterbiev, the rematch, he showed that he had an even further level of acceleration. On top of that, you have a great jab, you have elite timing, great movement, and then you have the Soviet system, which is awkward. So this is a big puzzle for Callum Smith to solve. And then the fifth idea is that why this fight may never happen. And it may have nothing to do with styles. It may be economics. Now, when you take the Bivol Beterbiev, this is potentially a monster payday. Unfortunately, Bivol Smith doesn't catch light in the public's imagination. Now, again, some may argue that that premise is untrue, but if that premise is true, then this becomes a harder fight to make. In other words, the economics of the fight is problematic. I would argue that Smith is a strong British name, and because he's fought Canelo, he has some global branding. But despite that, does he have enough of a name on the world stage to make this fight work economically? And then the sixth idea is that if Bivol vacates rather than defends against Smith, that tells you exactly how the sport values him or how he values the belts. The risk reward of fighting Smith is problematic. Let me tell you why. Smith is dangerous. He has a great jab. He has a great counter left hook. He's a brave fighter. He has a high boxing IQ. And when he's on, he's a difficult man to beat. So now that's one element of it. Now the second element of it is that you could say now that with the Usyk situation of vacating the belts, you could argue there's a new cultural disregard for the belts, and only time will tell if that premise is true. So if you're looking at the risk of fighting Smith and you're thinking, okay, it's a big risk, but I'm not getting the reward, then you could think, well, I can vacate the belt and then I can make these other fights which have cultural and economic impact. And then the seventh idea is that the Beterbiev trilogy context kind of reframes everything. And the consensus here is that, people feel that Bivol wins the rematch a little wider as Beterbiev's aggression decays. I guess the premise here is that Beterbiev is getting older. I guess logically they're both getting older, but maybe there's an acceleration to Beterbiev with regards to aging within the ring. The problem is that Smith is chasing a division where two of the best men are locked in their own private war. They're in their own ecosystem, and it's a very difficult ecosystem to penetrate. And then the final idea, which is the eighth idea, is the uncomfortable forecast. For some may say that Smith's best case scenario is a competitive decision loss that looks respectable, but that's still a loss. For me, if Smith is optimal, then an upset is possible. But Smith needs to rediscover that form. Is that possible? How does he rediscover that form? Is it elite sparring? Is it an elite boxing environment? And I guess the question is, how much does Smith have left? Think of this. Callum Smith deserves respect, not just as a former champion, but also as an advocate for autism. So I admire the way he carries himself. But objectivity matters here. And styles, they do make fights. But Bivol is a uniquely difficult problem, whether it's his movement, his timing, his acceleration, and a defensive system that neutralizes aggression. Smith may still have the tools to compete, especially with the jab, the body work, but the inactivity, the age, and the economics, unfortunately, these all work against him. For the upset to happen, he must rediscover his best form and prove bravery can become strategy against elite opposition. So that's the end of the video. Now I'm trying to build a digital boxing community, and that means I'm interested in your thoughts, I'm interested in your perspectives, and I'm interested in your observations. Now, if you want to support the channel, press like, hype, and subscribe. And if you want to watch more content like this, then simply click here or click here. As always, thanks for your time. It is much appreciated.